You're listening to episode 153 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Heinz Hilbrecht joins us to speak about his book in German, Meditation und Gehirn, or in English, Meditation and the Brain. There seems to be an attitude prevalent in our contemporary society that ancient ways of trying to understand the world are in conflict with scientific findings. And in many cases, this is correct. The world isn't flat, and the sun doesn't revolve around it. But when we dismiss them out of hand because they are old, or because we have an aversion to the context in which the idea grew, we may be missing some early attempts at understanding that may have a very real grounding in how our minds work. Heinz Hilbrecht received his MA and PhD in geology and paleontology from Free University in Berlin, worked at ETH Zurich for 12 years, and became a freelance journalist in 2000. Heinz has a regular meditation practice since 1977, with his roots in secular Theravada and philosophical Taoism. He is married to a medical doctor, shared many lectures with her at the university as a basis for his interest in human psychology and neurobiology. In his German book, Heinz tracks the way of the meditator described by the Buddha based on modern scientific knowledge. He claims the jhanas and stages of meditation reflect increasingly deeper access to usually unconscious processes in the mind and the body. So sit back, relax, and have a nice black forest berry tea. And our guest today is Heinz Hilbrecht. Heinz, thank you very much for being here.
Hello, Ted. I'm glad to talk to you.
We're going to talk about your book, and I'm going to have you say the title of it.
The title in German is Meditation und Gehirn. That means meditation and the brain. And there's a subtitle that I keep very important. This is Old Wisdom and Modern Science, because I love to compare the old wisdom that has been transmitted through us through the past 2,500 years with the knowledge of the modern science.
That's perfect, and that's exactly what we do on this podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association. So, Heinz, if you would tell us about your background and what got you interested in meditation and science and all of that.
Well, in principle, I'm sort of an addict to science because I love to increase my knowledge and to share knowledge with the scientific community. From my education, I am a geologist and mainly a paleontologist and paleobiologist. So I was out on adventurous trips with ships on the sea and did marine biology and also in the fossil realm. But I met my wife when I started to study, and we shared these lectures. So I got half of a medical education because my wife became a medical doctor. And at this time, I learned all the vocabulary and the background of medicine and the biology of the human body.
Excellent. And as with your background, it sounds like you're probably on the side of evolution makes sense rather than creationism. Just a guess.
Hey, I am a paleontologist. Evolution is everything. I don't even think about creationism, but no. We can see evolution in the record. That's a matter of fact.
Yep, totally with you. My degree's in biology. I'm right there with you, brother.
No, I even worked about evolution, and my view on the world and living things is in fact derived from evolution, and even meditation I see as a sort of evolution on a private basis. It's a gradual progress that you can make through practicing.
So tell us about your how you first encountered meditation and what that was like and how that progressed for you.
This was fun because it happened when I was 18 years old. There was a traditional Chinese doctor, a Chinese from Malaysia, who came over to Germany to teach martial arts. And this was the time of Bruce Lee and all this hype, and I wanted to learn martial arts. And after a few weeks, um, this doctor, my teacher, took me on the side and said, "Well, Heinz, forget the martial arts. This is well, probably not beneficial for you on the long run, but I've got something for you." And then he started to teach me meditation. And first we learned the techniques for a few days, and then we started to walk around in the city for whole nights over weeks. He stayed in Germany for 6 weeks, 2 times a year, and we spent every night walking around, practicing, doing exercises in the real world, sitting down somewhere right on the street, meditating, and all this was wow. And since then I'm meditating.
That's wonderful, and to have approached the practice as many people do from either some suffering in their life or curiosity or martial arts, as many of us, you and I and our friend Jan Ford, have all come to it from that. But to hear that your initial practice was from the very start not a removal on the cushion, but active participation in the world, in moment by moment living. That's interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
we were practicing in the supermarket actually. My teacher told me to just stand there in a qigong attitude right in the middle of the supermarket. Yeah. And I stood there for an hour, for example, and with these exercises, you really learn to die, right? Because you have to accept that people look at you. It's a frightening situation at the first, but after some time, I really enjoyed it because I was learning to communicate to people without words. I could look at them and could calm them down there so that they were not frightened by this strange guy standing there in the middle. And well, in the fruit and vegetable department, we were practicing intuition. Which tomato is the right tomato for me today? This one and not that one, right? This sort of exercise is very, very inspiring.
So you've been doing this for 35 some years. And,
Yes, right. It's my 35th anniversary this year.
oh, congratulations, congratulations. And you mentioned in our conversation online and setting up this interview that the background was a Chinese, a Taoist tradition of meditation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
My teacher came from the Taoist tradition, but he was also a Buddhist and an atheist. Uh, so he was looking at Taoism and Buddhism from an atheist view. So this secular component I learned from the very beginning to look at nature, the real world. My teacher was a scientist, yeah? And he was linked to Buddhists. He was a Buddhist and a Taoist. For Chinese, this is normal. And so I was influenced by the Buddhist ideas and the Taoist ideas from the first minute. And my teacher was very old. He was in his 80s. And I was in contact with him for only 3 years, and he died then. But before he died, he built a contact with a monastery, a Buddhist monastery in Australia. And I've never been to Australia, but we were in contact first by letters, then through the internet, and in 1993, with the invention of the World Wide Web, we had a very close contact, and now we are contacted via Skype. Yeah? And in fact, these friends, these Buddhists were very influential. They were Tibetan Buddhists, but they were always looking for my way, and they advised me through the decades to get joined to Theravada ideas and to this secular Buddhism, because they found I am a science I shouldn't believe. I should experiment and learn. This was my way, they felt. And so they supported me all the time in the secular view. So from a very, very Buddhist attitude to find the way for the individual and not just the idea for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. Now tell us about this blending then of your interest in science and what's going on in the brain with this ancient teaching. How did you start putting those together over time?
Well, through experience and practicing. Patience was something my teacher taught me very early on. And the attitude to explain everything when it happens is very wrong. Yeah. So I collected the experience from the meditation, just observed what happened with me, with my emotions, with my acting in the real world, and just recognized it. And in parallel to that, I was digging deeper and deeper into psychology, neurosciences, and all these things. And I had a job to do at the same time, so I wasn't busy on this in every minute of my life. So when it became fun for me, I was digging into this literature and started to learn and understand. And I had a job to do because my teacher told me in these days in the early 70s, well, Heinz, take you 30 years of time, meditate, and then translate your experiences into the language of science. You need to build a lot of experience to really say something that is valuable with substance. And so I had 30 years of time through his advice. And after that, I was starting to translate. And he told me then to write a book and then to get into contact with Asia. And he told me they will listen and you will make a contribution. The Western contribution to meditation is science. This is your strength in the West. And build a communication with Asia through science. And they communicate the old wisdom, and both together will be beneficial and will cause progress for everybody. And with this in mind, I wrote the book, and I was surprised because the book appeared on the market. There's a Frankfurt book affair here. This is one of the largest in the world, and there were representatives of a Vietnamese publishing house. And they saw the book and rushed at it. So the book has been translated to Vietnam now and to Vietnamese now, and it has appeared there in August this year. And Asia is really listening. My teacher was very right, and we are getting into a very interesting exchange and discussion. And I hope this will progress.
That's wonderful to hear. And in fact, one of the reasons that we made sure we have a Google Translate widget on the Secular Buddhist Association website is to help share the written word that we have with others so that they can use that. And it may not be perfect, but it's a start. And I think that's happening as well, that this particular approach to the teaching and practice, that it can be outside of a context of a particular traditional lineage and still be very applicable and very beneficial to people. So I'm very glad to see that. And what I'd like you to do, Heinz, is for you to tell us about the jhanas. That was how this conversation first began on the Facebook page for the podcast. Tell us about jhanas and the book itself, and in your work with that, and what you found in what science says about them.
Well, there's a lot of research on meditators during their first weeks. This is largely motivated by MBSR, stress release, medical application. And there's not so much research done on meditators who are practicing for many years. That's a major flaw in the available science at the moment. But we know that even in the first weeks, there are some major changes in the brain and the biochemistry of the brain. The amygdala, that's a center that controls fear and startle and this negative emotions, outrage. The amygdala starts to change. There's growth in the amygdala, new brain matter originating there, growing there. And this is very, very interesting because with meditation, with the practice, fear is reduced and startling is reduced. These strong emotions decrease. And we can really see why, because the amygdala changes. And on the other hand, there is something that was a big surprise to me. In 2008, a PhD thesis was published by a student here in Germany, and she could measure the third eye. This is a brain region that is called the orbitofrontal cortex. And right between the eyebrows, she found growth. And that's exactly the position where we know the third eye from the Buddha statues, right? And this was amazing. Orbitofrontal cortex is the counterpart of the amygdala. The orbitofrontal cortex calms down the amygdala. The amygdala triggers stress reactions, fear, bomb, outrage. The orbitofrontal cortex is calming this down, introduces reason. It evaluates risk. And hey, you'd better talk to this guy. Don't punch him on the nose. That's the action of the orbitofrontal cortex. Yeah.
I'm always grateful for that message from my brain, not to punch someone in the nose. Yeah. So, Heinz, in doing research for the writing of the book, you just mentioned some things that you found that were surprising. Are there some experiences you've had, and I know you're very encouraged by the interactions with a Vietnamese audience. Are there some other things that have been happening that you've noticed that have been very encouraging for you from the writing of the book?
Yes, because well, if you write a book today, you don't earn much money, right?
Right.
But you're invited to give talks, yeah. And I've met hundreds of people now, but through giving talks to people all over Germany here, and it was very interesting to listen to their questions. The questions they had, they were mostly related to real world things. Not esoterics and this they wanted to change their life through meditation, and this was most interesting to see. And then the fascination to compare old wisdom with modern science and tell the people, hey, the Buddha more than 2,500 years ago was right. Yeah. This is to share this surprise was most fascinating. But I would like to come back to the brain because we've looked at brain regions and growth now, but the biochemistry is largely neglected by the meditating community. There's also major change in the biochemical activity in the brain and the whole body. And this is directly related to the jhanas, I think.
Tell us more about that.
All right. There's a fascinating measurements by positron emission tomography, PET. This method allows you to detect molecules. And there's one neurotransmitter, dopamine, that was measured by a Danish group. Meditators have concentrations of dopamine in the brain that are exorbitant, huge amounts. You would find these amounts of dopamine only in highly psychotic people. It's extreme. We are not psychotic, and these scientists have really looked at the meditators and found them to be very healthy and relaxed. But dopamine, the change in dopamine is something that is probably even more extreme than the change in the anatomical, in the biological brain. We are able to generate our own dopamine, and dopamine is something that makes you happy. It allows you to concentrate. It allows you to focus your mind. When you learn, when you have fun to learn something, and it's fascination by seeing new things. Yeah, this is dopamine, and at the same time, it really makes you happy. If you drink a little bit of alcohol, and this happiness derives from the dopamine. Alcohol triggers the release of dopamine in the brain. Yeah, but we are able, we as meditators are able to generate dopamine on a natural basis through concentration, and this is probably the background why meditators are more happy than other people, and are more concentrated, and are able to look at the world in a more relaxed and calm way. Yeah, this and this, I think, is probably what you experience in the first two jhanas mostly. The ability to think more clearly, examine things, and then the emotions, delight and happiness that you noted in your blog. Delight and happiness are directly related to dopamine. Yeah, this is the expression of the biochemical change in the brain.
Now, what kinds of studies in your research for this, you've reviewed a number of studies. What would you like to see happen next? What is the area of study that you see as the most conspicuous absence in the literature?
We need studies that I would focus the science in two directions. First, we need studies about advanced meditators. There's not very much data available about the brains and the biological functions in meditators that practice, say, 20, 30, 40 years. This data is very limited. And then we need to include the subjective aspects of the meditators. The scientists don't use to ask the people, hey, how do you feel? How do you experience the world? But this would be the link to the real world. As a meditator, I don't have I don't have all these functional magnetic resonance tomographs and all this available. But if I could link the scientific data with experiences, how do meditators see the world? How do they experience their emotion? How do they experience their contact with other people? I could translate these subjective impressions and could understand, hey, yes, now the orbitofrontal cortex has grown a little bigger. Yeah, for example, this sort of translation of the scientific data to the real world. There's a flaw, and there should be a little more activity in this direction.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, and And I would suggest it would be also very helpful to see different kinds of meditation comparatively studied. That we begin with not only novice meditators, but also do longitudinal studies of people just starting out over time in different kinds of meditation.
Yes, absolutely. There's nearly no comparative data available that compares the effects of the meditation practice in the different traditions. But we can speculate a little. My impression is that the Chinese methods dig deeper into the biochemical changes. What you experience as qi flow, for example, is a major change in neurotransmitters, in biochemical processes. And on the other hand, if you practice in a certain tradition, you are confronted with certain ideas, an attitude toward the world and other people. And this is important because meditation is not only a biological process. You have a biological basis, and from this basis, you start to learn in the real world. And it changes your attitude. It's a communication between the biological change and the learning. And if you learn under a certain influence of ideas, the learning will be different. And on the other hand, this reflects back on the biological change. If you practice compassion, for example, you will have a lot of change in parts of the brain that control the movements of the body. Right? So you with the ideas, you are focusing on certain parts of the biological processes, and this will cause a different mind, a different attitude to the world. And this sort of research with the focus on these differences would be very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And, it's interesting you're also bringing up in our conversation about qi flow corresponding to this biological process that we should always be aware that terms used in traditions are not necessarily wrong. They're references within their own time and their own context, just as ours are. And for us to simply be aware that when we do see terms like qi, we don't necessarily need to take it as an invisible energy that focuses on points that we can't really show. It may be references to biological processes.
Not at all. You're talking to a scientist.
So, Heinz, is there any effort in place to get the book printed in English?
Oh, I would love to, but books are part of a market, and a translation is expensive. I would be even willing to adapt the book to, say, the American audience, and because it's focused now a little bit on the German market and the German-speaking people. But yes, I would love to really work for this, and the English translation would be very, very valuable. I need partners who are willing to take the risk and to do it, to finance it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, our guest today has been Heinz Hilbrecht, and I'll have links to the book on the German Amazon site as well as to Heinz' Facebook page. So if you want to reach out to him, you can get hold of him there. Heinz, thank you very much for being here. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.